If you're watching this because you collect old VHS tapes, stop. Seriously. Especially if you ever find one without a label. Don't convince yourself it's forgotten home footage or some lost movie waiting to be discovered. Burn it before curiosity talks you into making the same mistake I did. I know that sounds dramatic, but I've already learned what happens when you press play, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I've destroyed every copy I made. The digital files are gone. The backups are gone. I even smashed the old VCR I used to capture the footage. There's only one copy left now, hidden somewhere nobody should ever find. I keep telling myself I'll destroy that one too, but every time I try, something stops me. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's guilt. Or maybe the tape simply doesn't want to disappear. The recording begins with static, then fades into a quiet bedroom. My bedroom. The same faded curtains. The cracked dresser beside the window. Even the small stain on the ceiling above my bed is exactly where it should be. I recognized every detail before I remembered the impossible part. The timestamp. According to the tape, it was recorded 13 years before my house was even built. I checked the property records myself. I checked them again because I thought I'd made a mistake. I hadn't. That bedroom didn't exist. Those walls didn't exist. Neither did the floor beneath the camera. There's one part of the tape I still haven't shown anyone. Not because I think people won't believe me. Because I know they will. The final frame lasts less than a second. Someone is standing exactly where I sleep every night. I should probably explain how I found it. A few months before everything happened, I moved into an older suburban neighborhood on the edge of town. It was the kind of place where every house looked almost identical until you noticed the little differences, different paint, different gardens, different stories buried behind the walls. I like that. After years of apartment living, the quiet felt earned. The neighbors waved without asking questions. Kids rode bicycles until sunset, and every evening the streets fell silent enough to hear the wind moving through old trees. I worked from home restoring vintage electronics for collectors online. Old camcorders, cassette decks, tube televisions, and especially VHS tapes. There was a surprisingly large community willing to pay good money for forgotten recordings, obscure movies, or family footage they wanted preserved before magnetic decay erased it forever. Most days were predictable. Clean the tape. Repair the machine. Capture the video. Repeat. Analog media felt honest somehow. Every scratch and flicker carried history. One afternoon, I noticed a handwritten sign taped to the window of an abandoned video rental store across town. Final liquidation. Everything must go. Places like that were disappearing fast, so I couldn't resist. Inside, the shelves were almost empty. Dust covered everything, and the air smelled like old cardboard and mildew. Behind the counter stood an elderly man quietly packing movies into boxes. He barely looked up when I walked in. "You buying?" he asked. "Or just remembering?" "A little of both." For the first time, he smiled. When I mentioned restoring VHS collections, he disappeared into a storage room and returned carrying a heavy, dust-covered box. "You can have these." Inside were dozens of unlabeled tapes stacked in no particular order. Most had blank white sleeves. Others had no sleeves at all. Only one caught my attention. Black cassette. No label. One faded piece of masking tape. Property number 17. The owner's expression changed instantly. He reached toward the tape before stopping himself. "Don't play that one." I laughed awkwardly. "What? It's cursed." He didn't laugh back. Instead, he quietly said, "People returned every tape, except that one." I waited for an explanation. None came. He refused to take the tape back, refused to charge me for it, and hurried me toward the door as though he suddenly wanted the entire box gone. The whole drive home, I kept thinking about his warning. It felt ridiculous. Just another creepy story to make an old videotape seemed more interesting. That night, curiosity won. I cleaned the cassette, connected my VCR to my capture setup, and pressed play. Static. Rain. Trees swaying beneath a gray sky. Nothing unusual. Then the camera began to move. Slowly, deliberately, panning across an empty field. My stomach tightened as the image settled on a patch of open land. I knew that field. It was the exact spot where my living room stands today. I thought the impossible part was the date. The first thing I did wasn't panic. It was rewind. Then I paused the frame showing the empty field and zoomed in until the image dissolved into blurred pixels. I kept telling myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe the timestamp was corrupted. Maybe someone had edited the recording years later. Magnetic tape can degrade in strange ways, and old equipment isn't exactly famous for accuracy. I wanted a technical answer because technical answers don't follow you into bed. The timestamp read April 14th, 1989. My house was completed in 2002, 13 years apart. I spent the entire next morning digging through public property records, old tax documents, archived aerial photographs, and local newspaper clippings. Every source agreed. Before 2002, my neighborhood was nothing but undeveloped land. No streets, no driveways, no foundations, just open fields bordered by trees. By lunchtime, I wasn't trying to prove the tape was real anymore. I was trying to prove the records were wrong. They weren't. That evening I played the cassette again. This time I watched every second. The camera drifted across the field with unnatural patience. Whoever held it never stumbled over uneven ground. It felt less like someone walking and more like something gliding through the landscape. Then it made a sharp right turn. At first I thought it was random. Then I recognized the path. The camera was following the exact route I take every morning from my front door to the kitchen. Except there wasn't a house. No walls. No roof. No floor. Just grass bending beneath invisible footsteps. The lens stopped for several seconds. Exactly where my kitchen island sits today. Rain continued falling onto empty earth. The camera turned again. Another invisible hallway. Another impossible route. I leaned closer to the screen without realizing it. Every movement matched the layout of my home perfectly, as though someone had built the house around the recording instead of recording the house after it was built. When the camera reached the back of the imaginary hallway, it stopped. It pointed toward a patch of empty air, toward the place where my bedroom would eventually exist. For nearly 20 seconds, nothing happened. Only wind. Only rain. Then a man's voice whispered so quietly I almost missed it. "He's going to sleep here." Silence. Every hair on my arm stood up. I replayed those 4 words again and again. Who was he? How could anyone know a bedroom would exist there? How could anyone know someone would one day sleep inside it? The tape answered nothing. Instead, the image violently distorted. Horizontal lines ripped across the screen. The colors inverted. For a single frame. Less than a blink. The empty field disappeared. My bedroom appeared. Modern furniture. Gray curtains. My bed. Gone immediately. I paused. Rewound. Frame by frame. There it was again. One impossible frame hidden inside thousands of ordinary ones. I took screenshots and started comparing every visible detail to my actual room. The dresser matched. The window placement matched. Even the cheap floor lamp beside my desk matched. Then I noticed something I couldn't explain away. A long scratch running across the wooden floor near the closet. I looked down. The exact same scratch was beneath my feet. I'd made it myself 2 weeks earlier while dragging a heavy bookshelf across the room. No recording from 1989 should have known it would exist. Sleep became impossible after that. Instead, I searched online. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. VHS predicts future. Impossible home video. Property tapes. Most searches returned conspiracy forums and obvious fiction, until one discussion kept appearing in archived search results. Foundation recordings. The posts described mysterious videotapes supposedly filmed years before disasters, murders, disappearances, even entire neighborhoods being built. Every tape carried a property number instead of a title. Almost every thread ended the same way: deleted, missing, author unavailable. One surviving comment caught my attention. If yours says property, stop watching before tape 3. I frowned. There was no tape 3, just the single cassette sitting beside my monitor. At least, that's what I believed. I should have listened. I should have thrown the tape away after finding those forum posts. Every instinct I had was telling me to stop digging, to unplug the VCR, to pretend none of it had ever happened. Instead, I did what curiosity always convinces people to do. I watched it again. This time I let the tape play past the point where it had originally stopped. The screen dissolved into thick, hissing static. It lasted almost 3 full minutes, broken only by occasional white flashes and the low mechanical hum of the cassette turning inside the machine. I was just about to eject it when the image suddenly returned. A new timestamp appeared. October 3rd, 1991. Still 11 years before my house was built. The picture steadied. For a second, I thought I was looking at another empty field. Then the camera moved forward. Not across grass. Across hardwood flooring. I felt my stomach drop. The camera was inside a finished house. My house. It moved confidently through rooms that, according to every official record, did not exist for another decade. The strangest part wasn't what I was seeing. It was how naturally the unseen cameraman behaved. He never hesitated. He never searched for an entrance. Invisible doors swung open exactly where my real doors stand today. The lens turned corners with perfect familiarity, as though these walls had always been there, even when reality insisted they hadn't. I stood from my chair without realizing it, and slowly looked around my office. Everything on the screen matched. Everything around me matched. The camera reached the hallway leading toward the staircase. Except there wasn't one. On the tape, the stairs climbed upward exactly where they should. Outside the recording, my own staircase sat only a few feet away. The impossible overlap made my head ache. The camera began climbing. Each step landed on something invisible, rising through open air before walls gradually shimmered into existence around it like a memory forming backward. I whispered, "No." The recording continued as if it hadn't heard me. Family photographs decorated walls that officially didn't exist. Light fixtures hung from ceilings that hadn't been framed. Shadows stretched naturally through rooms that should have been empty fields. Then the camera reached the second floor. My breathing slowed. I already knew where it was going. The hallway. The third door on the left. My bedroom. The door opened. There it was. The faded curtains. The cracked dresser. The stain on the ceiling. Even the pile of unfolded laundry I'd been ignoring all week rested in the corner exactly where I'd left it. Someone was asleep beneath the blankets. Dark hair, gray shirt, blue plaid pajama pants. The same pair I was wearing the night I found the tape. No. I leaned closer. It was me. Not someone who looked like me. Me. Years before I'd ever lived there. The camera slowly approached the bed. Closer. Closer. It stopped beside my pillow. The room became perfectly silent. Then the sleeping version of me spoke. "Don't rewind." The voice was soft, barely louder than breathing. My eyes in the recording never opened. My body never moved. Only my lips. "Don't rewind." The tape ended instantly. Blue screen. Silence that I stared at my own reflection in the television for what felt like an hour. Finally, I grabbed my phone and called my friend Marcus. He'd helped me restore tapes before and knew enough about video editing to tell me if I was losing my mind. I sent him the captured footage. He watched it while I stayed on the line. Several long minutes passed. Finally, he sighed. "You're editing this. I wish I knew how." "No, seriously. This has to be composited somehow." "You think I fake property records too?" He didn't answer. Instead, he quietly said, "Delete it." I almost listened. Instead, I rewound the tape. Nothing happened. Confused, I ejected it. The cassette was already rewinding by itself inside the machine. No motor, no sound, just the reels turning slowly backward. The next morning, I checked again. The tape was sitting at the beginning, ready to play. The following night, it had rewound itself again. Every single night after that, no matter where I left it, the cassette always returned to the beginning before midnight. I stopped wondering who filmed it. I started wondering what existed first. My house, or whatever had already been living inside it. I stopped sleeping after that. The changes began so gradually that I blamed exhaustion. After several nights without real sleep, every creak sounded louder than it should have. Every shadow seemed to linger a little too long. I kept telling myself that fear was making ordinary things feel supernatural. Then ordinary things stopped behaving normally. One morning I walked into the hallway and noticed faded floral wallpaper covering the walls. It looked decades old, yellowed with age, peeling at the corners. I frowned because I'd painted those walls myself after moving in. I reached out to touch the paper. My fingers met smooth gray paint. The wallpaper vanished. I stood there for nearly a minute, wondering whether I'd imagined it. That wasn't the last time. Chairs appeared slightly out of place when I returned to a room. Cabinet doors I knew I'd closed hung open. A coffee mug would disappear from the kitchen and reappear upstairs beside my bed. Nothing dramatic, just enough to make me question my memory. Then the photographs changed. There was a framed family picture hanging above the fireplace. It had always shown my parents and me during a camping trip when I was 12. One evening I glanced at it and froze. My parents were gone. Instead, an older couple I'd never seen before stood smiling with two little girls between them. They looked comfortable, happy, like they belonged there. I blinked. The photograph became normal again. I took it off the wall and hid it in a drawer. The next morning it was hanging above the fireplace again. A week later, I asked my next-door neighbor whether anyone had lived in my house before me. He looked confused. Of course. I thought I was the first owner. He laughed. The Harris family lived there for years. There was never a Harris family. His smile faded. You feeling okay? That afternoon, I checked county records again. According to every document, no one had occupied the property before me. No Harris family. No previous owners. No conflicting paperwork. It was as though my neighbors remembered a history reality refused to acknowledge. I became obsessed with the house itself. Every attic beam, every crawlspace, every loose floorboard. I convinced myself there had to be hidden cameras, forgotten renovations, something physical tying all of this together. 3 days later I found it. A section of hardwood near the upstairs closet sounded hollow. I pried the boards loose. Beneath them rested a rolled bundle of aging blueprints wrapped in brittle plastic. The architectural drawings matched my home's layout almost perfectly. Almost. There was one extra room. No measurements. No label. Just a rectangular space hidden behind the second-floor hallway wall. I checked the actual dimensions of the house. There wasn't enough space for it to exist. Yet I'd already seen that room. Not in real life. On the VHS. It appeared for less than 2 seconds during one of the glitches, hidden behind visual distortion I'd originally dismissed as tape damage. Now I couldn't stop thinking about it. I measured every wall upstairs. One section was noticeably thicker than it should have been. I knocked. Solid. Then hollow. My pulse quickened. Using a pry bar, I carefully removed part of the drywall. Behind it wasn't insulation. It was another narrow wooden door. No handle. No hinges visible. Just old painted wood that looked much older than the rest of the house. The door opened inward with almost no effort. Inside was a cramped storage space barely large enough for one person. Shelves lined every wall. They weren't empty. Dozens of VHS tapes sat neatly arranged in chronological order. None carried movie titles. Only years. The sequence continued. Then, my hands were shaking before I even touched it. Every instinct screamed at me to walk away. Instead, I carried the cassette downstairs. When I pressed play, the screen showed tomorrow's date. The recording began exactly where I am now. Same room, same chair, same camera. Me telling this story, word for word. Everything matched until the recording reached its final seconds. The version of me on the screen never turned around. He never noticed the person standing behind him. Tall, motionless, smiling. That's when I finally understood what the forum meant. The tapes don't predict the future. They archive it. Reality bends until it matches what's already been recorded, which means someone or something made these recordings long before any of us arrived. And if that's true, maybe neighborhoods aren't built first. Maybe the tapes are. The houses simply grow around them. There was one rule I should have followed above all the others. Never watch the tape dated after today. But I already had. I'm recording this because I finally accepted something I spent weeks trying to deny. I never escaped. Moving wouldn't have mattered. Destroying the tapes didn't matter. I burned 3 of them in my backyard. I dropped another into the river. I crushed one beneath my truck until nothing recognizable remained. Every midnight, another VHS tape appears. Sometimes it's waiting outside my front door. Sometimes it's sitting on the coffee table where I know I left nothing. Once, I found one resting on my pillow before I went to bed. They're always clean, always unlabeled, always waiting. The newest tape arrived an hour before I started recording this. Tomorrow's date is written across the masking tape in faded black ink. I haven't watched it. Not yet. I'm trying to believe that choice still belongs to me. Maybe that's foolish. Maybe the recording already exists, whether I see it or not. If everything I've discovered is true, then the Foundation recordings were never documenting the future. They were preserving a version of reality that the rest of us eventually stumble into. The tape comes first. Everything else follows. If you've been listening carefully, you've probably noticed something I haven't mentioned. I never found property number 1, or 2, or 16. That means there are others. Other houses. Other people. Other recordings waiting for someone curious enough to press play. If you've ever come across an unlabeled VHS with nothing but a property number, I want you to tell me in the comments. Not because I think I can help. Because I need to know how many of us there are. But there's one thing I need you to promise me. If you notice anyone standing behind me while I'm telling this story, don't tell me. Please. Just don't. I'd rather spend one more night believing I'm alone. I'm going to prove there's nothing there. Happy. See. Nothing. I know how ridiculous this sounds. I can finally laugh about. The camera just flickered. Did you see that? Never mind. It's probably the old capture equipment. If you've ever found an unlabeled VHS tape marked with a property number, don't throw it away. Because if mine is real, yours already knows how your story ends.